I'm a psychologist with specialty in all forms of stress management, including addressing sleep issues. And I'm very honored today to be able to interview Dr. Robert Glidewell of the Colorado Insomnia Clinic. Before we start our interview today, I just want to say a couple words about Sleep ASAP. Sleep ASAP is a new international educational platform to increase awareness of sleep challenges and addressing sleep challenges by means other than pharmaceuticals. We're available, we have a number of webinars already posted online, and we're on Facebook, and you can find us on Meetup, and we hope you'll join us, and we hope that this webinar will be very useful for you. So welcome to you, Dr. Glidewell. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Great. So just off the top, would you tell us briefly a little bit about your personal story in overcoming insomnia and how you come to be a sleep expert today, in brief?
Sure. I had trouble sleeping really from the day I was born. I mean, my mom has stories about how I would never let her sleep, and you know, obviously that didn't bother me at all until I really became a teenager, and I found that I couldn't get to sleep at night. I would wake up in the middle of the night, and I couldn't get back to sleep. And I was able to really cope with that pretty well until I went into the military and got married and had a family. And you know, obviously, when you're working full time and you've got a family, life isn't very forgiving when you don't get a good night of sleep. And I certainly, it started to take its toll on me. And I was moody. I was grumpy. I you know, couldn't think as well as I wanted to at work. It just started to kind of take its toll on every area of my life. And so I started trying all kinds of different things. I would try some relaxation training. I would try medications, those different kinds of things. And so it was probably late 20s, or you know, around the time I turned 30, when I came across what's called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And I mean, this really opened my eyes. You know, I learned about these strategies and then these techniques for taking control of insomnia without medications, and within a matter of weeks, all of a sudden, my sleep patterns completely changed. I wasn't trying to live with the effects of not sleeping anymore, and I mean, it just kind of blew my mind that that I was able to have so much control over my sleep with some simple changes in behavior.
It's a really, we're going to get to some of what you have to offer. I'm fascinated because your situation is one in which the beginning, the onset, as you say, since you were born, there may have been some preset inclinations, your physiological, you know, what you were given as your start in life, your wiring, as it were. And at that early stage in life, of course, it couldn't have had anything to do with your cognitive set, the outlook, right, the perspective, the attitude. So yours is a situation where initially it was just the way you are, your nature, but then as that becomes a habit, then a mindset is established. Oh, I am somebody with these troubles and this way of life, and so then the mindset came afterwards, which becomes a feedback loop. So that's
right, yeah.
For people that say, well, I've been like this since I was a kid, this is just the way I am, it's interesting to note that you could be born with a tendency towards being more wakeful, and then a pattern of cognitions begins that reinforces and entrenches that more deeply. So that's really interesting. So
Yeah.
then were you already a psychologist, or at the point you were struggling, or was that part of what led you to?
Yeah, I discovered this process, these strategies, while I was in my doctoral program on the way to becoming a psychologist. And so once I had this experience and discovered that this kind of transformation of sleep was possible without medications, it just completely reoriented my whole direction as far as training to be a psychologist. From that point forward, I became 100% committed to sleep and sleep disorders, and really mostly insomnia, and have focused on that almost 100% ever since.
Okay. So, and you say, now I know that you have a number of keys that you look at, what you described as some secrets about insomnia. Obviously, they're no longer secrets since you know them, teach them, write about them, but would you share with our viewing audience what you consider some secrets, out in the open secrets about insomnia?
Sure. Well, I call them secrets because the majority of healthcare providers actually either don't know about them, don't believe in them, or don't actually know what to do with them, if they actually do kind of know that they're there and that they play a central role in trouble sleeping. So there's really three main things that I find that probably 90% of primary care providers aren't aware of about insomnia. And so, it's kind of what leads to medication being the primary thing. And I call these three things the insomnia trap, because once they get started, you have to directly do something about them if you're ever going to get free of insomnia. And so the first part is that if you have trouble sleeping repeatedly over a period of weeks or months, sooner or later your brain actually gets programmed or wired to sleep poorly. And once that happens, once we tip over into that, what I call programmed insomnia, the technical term is psychophysiological insomnia. Once that happens, unless we do something to kind of retrain the sleep system, your insomnia is going to keep on trucking. No matter how good your health is, no matter how good your life is, you're almost certainly going to keep having trouble sleeping. So that's the first part, is that programming.
I'm going to just interrupt you briefly. Have you observed, or perhaps you're aware of research that, is there a tipping point, or does that vary for everyone in terms of a week or a month of poor quality sleep before it becomes entrenched habit?
I don't know of any research that would say that there's a time frame we can put on it. Part of the problem is that most individuals don't seek help. The average is actually about 7 years that people will struggle with insomnia before they actually start to seek help for it. And so, my belief is that it happens fairly early on, probably in the first several months of having trouble sleeping, but I don't think there's any research on that kind of gives us a good number on that.
And are you referring to, when you say insomnia, are you...
Yeah, good question. So when I say insomnia, I'm essentially referring to any problems getting to sleep, staying asleep, waking up too early, or waking up feeling unrefreshed, regardless of the reason why that's happening. And there are many reasons for that. Maybe you've got sleep apnea or chronic pain or anxiety or depression. The thing that's important about the insomnia trap is that people fall into the insomnia trap in almost every case, regardless of the reason why they started having the trouble sleeping, and regardless of the reason that may be continuing to cause trouble. So maybe an individual has depression, and that's causing part of the sleep problem, but they also are probably in the cycle of this insomnia trap as well.
So, and were there other elements of what you were calling the 3 secrets or keys to the insomnia trap? Was there something?
Yeah, so there's the 3 pieces of the insomnia trap. The first is this programming that I talked about. The second is when we start having trouble sleeping, we just don't lie down and take it and complain about it. We're going to do something to try to make it better. And in most cases, that takes the form of starting to put more effort into trying to sleep. Sometimes we come up with these various bedtime routines or things that we try to do to create just the right situation for sleep or get ourselves nice and sleepy before bedtime. But the more effort we put into sleep, the farther away sleep gets. It's just one of those things that sleep is a letting go, and so the harder we try, the harder it is. So we do things like that. Sometimes we'll start spending more time in bed thinking, well, if I'm not going to be able to get to sleep, then I need to spend an extra hour or 2 in bed. We start taking naps, things like that. And so the things we do to try to fix insomnia actually end up making it worse, even though they seem to make sense on the surface. But when we start trying to react to or compensate for not sleeping, it actually fuels the fire. So that's the second aspect of the insomnia trap.
Okay. Of course, I have a question or comment about that, but I'm going to wait and let you speak of the third element before asking.
Okay, okay. And the last one that I find is a major contribution or aspect of this insomnia trap that is rarely recognized or thought of by our typical kind of healthcare providers is our circadian rhythm or our body clock. We all have some tendency to be either a night owl or a morning lark, meaning that our body clocks want us to go to bed early and get up early, or stay up later and get up later. And if the schedule that we're trying to follow or the schedule that our life demands of us is out of sync with our internal body clock, then it doesn't really matter what we want. If we want to go to bed at 10, but our body clock says it's not ready to shut off until midnight, then we're going to have trouble getting to sleep unless we do something to match up that schedule and that internal clock. And so knowing that internal timing is an essential part of digging ourselves out of that insomnia trap.
Okay. Well, I have questions on both. Regarding the second key about more efforting actually creates more difficulty sleeping. Of course, it makes sense since sleep is a letting go and efforting is a gearing up. But you're not, if I'm not mistaken, you're not opposed to or telling us that, or are you, that those basic factors of what people typically call sleep hygiene, you know, turning off electronics an hour or more before wanting to go to sleep, having dimmer lighting later in the evening, not over-exercising, you know, rigorous exercise right before sleep, and a number of other things, which are related to trying to create the conditions. I would guess that those are still useful and valid, that what you're cautioning people against is to have a kind of anxious striving in their efforts around the sleep preparation. Would that be?
That's right. And let me just clarify what that second piece of the insomnia trap is, and that is a combination of any behaviors that we use to try to overcome insomnia that actually backfire on us. So there's a whole kind of combination or set of things that we do to try to overcome insomnia that backfire. And so one of those is by becoming overly, putting too much effort into trying to sleep. And so to kind of get around right to your question, I still believe that all of the sleep hygiene things that you're talking about, making the bedroom comfortable and dark, and avoiding caffeine within probably 6 hours of bedtime, exercising regularly, but not really within 2 or 3 hours of bedtime. All of those sleep hygiene things, I still agree with those 100%. When I say coming up with things in the evening or around bedtime that can backfire or cause too much effort, is I talk to people all the time, and they've come up with these fairly complicated hour or 2 hour long routines that they feel like they've got to walk themselves through in order to try to get a good night's sleep. So that's what I'm referring to when I talk about sleep effort.
So kind of almost becoming a bit obsessive about it in their routines or
yep.
concern. Okay, great. So I know that you've got, thank you for that. And about the circadian rhythms and our body clocks, you mentioned, unless you do something to change or sync up your rhythm with the demands of what your schedule requires, it will always be a challenge. So you do perceive that people are able to make that a change if they need to, their lifestyle, their work.
Absolutely.
Okay. So then does that mean circadian rhythm can actually change?
Absolutely. Our body clocks are designed to be able to adjust to the naturally occurring light-dark cycle, so nighttime and daytime. And because they're made to be adjustable, we have some influence over those, and we can actually reset our clocks to some degree to line up with our lifestyles. Now, there's a limit to that, certainly, but yeah, we definitely have significant influence over the timing of that clock.
Great. So there's an awkward pause here because our images are out of sync, so I'm not sure exactly when you're done speaking. If we have time, I'm going to get back to you on a question with that, but let's move along to, I know that you've got a number of very specific strategies to bring relief to people who are struggling, a couple of what you refer to as rapid relief strategies, and I'm sure that some of them take individual coaching and some training, but would you be able to at least introduce those strategies to us today?
Absolutely. Certainly many of the strategies that we can use to transform insomnia without medication, so, some of those, or many of them, do require some individual coaching. However, the research that has come out probably over the last 10 years, maybe more, has started to show if we can teach folks some of these basic principles, many, maybe even 30%, will be able to completely transform their insomnia on their own without needing to see a doctor or a therapist or have coaching or things like that. And so I am happy to start to teach some of these because I think that many of the people who watch this will be able to transform their sleep just based on what I want to teach.
So encouraging. Take it away.
Absolutely. I mean, that's kind of one of the reasons that I'm so excited to do this work, is because it's just so effective and it's so just so workable for people. So I want to talk about five specific strategies, and I'm going to just kind of lay those out there real quick, and then we'll get into the details of those. And most people will have heard these in some shape or form in the past, but I just want you to stick with me because we're going to get into the nitty-gritty details of how to put these in place and why they often don't work for people. So the 5 strategies. The first one is use the bed for sleep and sex only. So that means you don't want to be reading, watching TV, doing your taxes, talking on the phone, playing on your tablet, whatever it is, social media. So use the bed for sleep and sex only. Next one, go to bed only when you're sleepy. So if you know you're not ready for bed, or you know you're not sleepy, don't go in there. Wait until you're really ready. The next piece is, and in my view, this is the most important piece, is if you're not asleep in 15 or 20 minutes, and this applies at the beginning of the night, or if you wake up in the middle of the night, if you're not asleep in 15 or 20 minutes, you need to get up, get out of bed, go to another room, and hang out for, my recommendation is 15 or 20 minutes, and then go back and try again. So that's the third step. The fourth step is to get out of bed at the same time every single day, 7 days a week. And there are some of my colleagues, the folks that do what I do, that believe that this step is enough for some people to completely start to reshape their sleep patterns if they just 7 days a week get out of bed at the same time. And then the last one is no napping. And I'm really a big fan of naps. I think they're a really useful tool to help people function at their highest levels and to reduce some of the drain that insomnia can cause. But the best situation is no napping, and if you have to nap, we'll also talk about what I call some sweet napping strategies, which is being able to nap without ruining your sleep later at night. So those are the five basic strategies.
Okay. Well, as a psychologist, I think I have a clue as to why these strategies work, but this is your moment, and it would be wonderful to elucidate, if you would elucidate any of those that you would like to, as to why they work or what's important about them.
Sure, sure. Well, let's just start with the first one. So use the bed for sleep and sex only. This one is important because if we're trying to reshape your sleep pattern, we want to send the brain a very clear message that the bed is for sleeping. And you can think of it that if you're in bed and you want to sleep in bed, you also want to Facebook in bed, and you also want to read in bed, and you also want to watch TV in bed, your brain starts to get confused. That's probably the easiest way to put it, is you get in bed and your brain's like, oh, well, I could do any of these things. If you really want to go to sleep, then you want to send that very clear message. The only thing that happens in there is sleeping. And so you can think of that first strategy as setting a clean slate or a clean picture for your brain to know exactly what you expect it to do when you get into bed. Now, one of the big objections that I often get from folks is, well, I'll never fall asleep without the TV on, or if I don't read, I'll never fall asleep. They've really come to experience the TV or reading as the thing that helps them sleep rather than something that might be causing a problem. And my response to that is, well, it may or may not be causing a problem, but if we want to fix your sleep problem, then why wouldn't we give this a try and see if it works? And for most people, once they get over the hump of using the bed only for sleep and maybe doing TV or Facebook or reading somewhere else before bed, within a week or two, they're so much happier because they're able to start sleeping much better. So,
now, you did specify. Sorry.
Go ahead.
You did specify using the bed only for sleep and sex, and although it opens up a whole entire new topic on this sleep challenge issue, for some people in our world today, sex and the internet are very much paired. You know, the porn industry is huge, and that somebody's watching it, so that's a part of people's lives and sex lives, whether they're partnered or solo. So what recommendations do you have for them, since you're encouraging people to get not use computers or television? Does that come up in your sessions with people, or what is your coaching on that?
Right. Sure. Well, I think what so the sleep and sex only in bed doesn't mean that sex can only happen in bed. If you want to have sex somewhere else, I certainly have no objections to that.
No, what I was referring to is that.
Is that kind of what you're saying?
No, what I was referring to is the opposite. People that use the internet, specifically pornography on the internet, as part
Sure.
of their, they think of that as part of their sex life, and so for them that bringing the computer to bed or somewhere in the bedroom is normative. So, you know, bed, it's okay to use the bed for sex, but they can't use the computer, and there's a large portion of the population that links sex and
Sure. Sure. Well, I would say, you know, the way that I think about sleep and sex only in bed is that sexual activity, it has a distinct kind of start and end point, and it's distinct from sleep in most cases. And so, you know, what you're saying is that maybe these screens in some shape or form are part of that sexual activity period. And I would say as long as it remains distinct from the intended sleep activity, then you know, I don't know that I would have an objection to that. You know, honestly, that question has never come up in with all the folks that I've worked with. But you know, honestly, in the setting that I work, I don't know if folks would feel comfortable bringing that up.
It's a huge topic that is under-addressed, in that the whole, you know, many associations around sex and sexuality and the bed, people who have been survivors of rape or all kinds of things where the bed has a negative association. So that we'll have to save that for another webinar and maybe a different expert. But I wanted
Sure.
to bring it up and mention that. And is there anything else in those 5 points that you'd like to go into a little bit more? We don't have a lot of time, but we have a few more minutes. So.
Sure, sure. So the aspect of those 5 strategies that, in my view, is the important is getting out of bed if you're unable to sleep within 15 or 20 minutes. And I call this the escape, hang out, try again technique. And so what that means is if you're not asleep in 15 or 20 minutes, I want you to get up, get out of bed, and go to another room. And when you're out of that other room, that time is not doing work, checking email, cleaning the house, doing the bills, things like that. And it's also not time for you to be trying to get sleepy. You're literally just hanging out, keeping yourself occupied if you can't sleep. And so maybe you're reading or watching some TV or something like that.
So turning
and
on
then,
a screen, so turning on a screen at that point, like computer or television screen, is not a counterindicated. You don't think that isn't an overstimulating situation? Somebody could turn on a movie, even if it's a high energy movie, you know, with violence or drama,
sure.
normal activities.
Yeah. So what I recommend, whether it's TV or reading or something else, is that it needs to be neutral or non-activating. So certainly, you know, no politics, horror movies, war movies, things like that. Nothing that gets you riled up. But you know, routine kind of TV. I can't hear you anymore, Hannah.
Okay, and I had the same problem for a moment with you, so I'm not sure when you're speaking. Yeah, as a therapist myself, when I recommend a similar strategy, I discourage the use of the television because you don't really know what's coming on. You don't know what's going to show up in a commercial, or, you know, and what might get stimulated. And I personally use the reading method, and I coach people to read something boring. Go to that book that they never can get through, or a magazine article that they're not, you know, supercharged interested in, so that it's not overstimulating.
Yeah. I tend to disagree with the boring part. I don't hear this so much anymore, but when I first started doing this, I used to hear this all the time, that their doctor had told them to get up and read the phone book. This is not, you know, getting out of bed and going to the other room is not meant to be torture, and it doesn't have to be. You know, really the kind of the magic of this strategy happens as soon as you get out of bed. That's where the real powerful activity happens. So as long as what you're doing when you're out of bed doesn't get you activated, I don't really care what you do. The thing is, like work or exercise tends to get people activated, so I list those things as don't do's.
Very good. Okay, that's clear. And anything else that you want to?
And then the last thing,
please.
The last thing about that is, so you hang out for 15 or 20 minutes, and then you go back to bed and try again. And if you don't fall asleep in 15 or 20 minutes, you get up and go through that whole process again. And in the beginning, you may find yourself laying down, getting up, laying down, getting up several times a night. And that's okay, that's normal, certainly unpleasant, but if you're consistent about this stuff for about 14 days, probably 30 to 50% of people are going to see a major change in their sleep patterns.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And with the other 50 or 60%, you provide more individualized coaching that modifies some of these or add other elements to their protocols?
Absolutely. There is so much more beyond just these 5 strategies that I've talked about. There are so many more things we can do, getting into controlling and manipulating sleep schedules, relaxation or meditation training, so many other things that we can do. Oftentimes, when we've had trouble sleeping, it starts to mess with our minds. And you were referring, when we started this call, about this cognitive factors in this mindset. And I mean, anyone who's had trouble sleeping for a long time can really know how it messes with your mind. And so sometimes we need to really get in there and look at what are those thoughts and beliefs that have come up when we've had trouble sleeping, and how do we start to rework those and challenge those. So there are many things that we can do, and sometimes it just involves getting a self-help book. I've got a book that's going to be published next month, and I'm going to offer whoever's on the webinar, I'll offer them a free copy of a special edition of that book. You can see a psychologist like you or me. There's online programs. There's so many ways to take care of this.
I'm glad that you mentioned in the mix when you said relaxation exercises or meditation. Early on in your personal story, you had said you tried relaxation exercises and they didn't work. And what I'm hearing, and I want to emphasize, is that relaxation exercises by themselves were not sufficient, but with a cluster of strategies, relaxation exercises and or meditation practices can be an additional useful part of a group of strategies working together. So thank you for that. And your timing is perfect. Would you like to say anything more about how the webinar viewers can connect with you further, or with your digital copy of your book? This would be the time.
Absolutely. So as far as the book, if you go to coloradoinsomniaclinic.com/revolution edition, and that will give people will be able to put in their name and email and get a free copy of the book. They will also have access to a 25-minute video that teaches in a little bit more depth the things that I've outlined on the webinar today. So I mean, I just can't express enough that these things work, and many people with insomnia, given just the free resources that I'm offering, you know, the video and the book, many people, that will be enough for them to start sleeping better, and they'll never have to go and have that conversation with their doctors. The other thing that I would say, just as a last note, is many people who are using sleep medications, when they start to use these strategies, they're able to get free of sleep medications. And so there's also, I just want to say, not only can you fix insomnia, but you can also use these things to get away from sleep medications. And obviously that should always be done with a doctor that's prescribing those medications, but there is a way out of sleep medication dependence as well.
Beautiful, and that's a very generous offer, and you're available to people via Skype or only in person, or are you available?
Yep, so through the ColoradoInsomniaClinic.com, you can learn more just about the individual services, and pretty soon we're going to do some group services and classes that provide a little bit more in-depth coaching. And so you can learn more about that at the website. I see folks individually in my clinic in Colorado Springs, and some web-based or phone-based counseling and coaching as well, but those individual services are only available for folks in Colorado. Now, the educational and coaching services are available, nationwide and internationally.
Great. Well, those are very generous offers, providing that 25-minute video and a digital version of your book. I really appreciate that. That's going to help many, many people. And I really appreciate your clarity and the work that you've done for yourself in overcoming insomnia, and then making so many clear, concrete, useful strategies available to so many people. So thank you for talking with us today. Is there anything else you would like to add briefly that maybe I didn't ask you?
No, that's it. I just really encourage people to take advantage of these resources. They really can help, and it just really is a matter of if you're able and willing to do some of these strategies consistently. All it takes is 14 to 21 days. That's it, 2 to 3 weeks, and it can make a big difference. I mean, it can really just revolutionize. And I hope that you have that experience.
Great. Thank you so much. So you'll let us know when the Spanish version of your book is out.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm sure there's a big need. So
absolutely, yes.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and this opportunity to speak here.
Thank you all for joining us today on this webinar, and to our viewing audience, and have a good night's sleep and sweet dreams wherever you are. Thank you.
And within a matter of weeks, all of a sudden, my sleep patterns completely changed. I wasn't trying to live with the effects of not sleeping anymore, and I mean, it just kind of blew my mind that that I was able to have so much control over my sleep with some simple changes in behavior.
It's a really, we're going to get to some of what you have to offer. I'm fascinated because your situation is one in which the beginning, the onset, as you say, since you were born, there may have been some preset inclinations, your physiological, what you were given as your start in life, your wiring, as it were. And at that early stage in life, of course, it couldn't have had anything to do with your cognitive set, the outlook, right, the perspective, the attitude. So yours is a situation where initially it was just the way you are, your nature, but then as that becomes a habit, then a mindset is established. Oh, I am somebody with these troubles and this way of life, and so then the mindset came afterwards, which becomes a feedback loop. So that's
right, yeah.
For people that say, well, I've been like this since I was a kid, this is just the way I am, it's interesting to note that you could be born with a tendency towards being more wakeful, and then a pattern of cognitions begins that reinforces and entrenches that more deeply. So that's really interesting. So
Yeah.
then were you already a psychologist, or at the point you were struggling, or was that part of what led you to?
Yeah, I discovered this process, these strategies, while I was in my doctoral program on the way to becoming a psychologist. And so once I had this experience and discovered that this kind of transformation of sleep was possible without medications, it just completely reoriented my whole direction as far as training to be a psychologist. From that point forward, I became 100% committed to sleep and sleep disorders, and really mostly insomnia, and have focused on that almost 100% ever since.
Okay. So, and you say, now I know that you have a number of.
Per sleep, and obviously that didn't bother me at all until I really became a teenager, and I found that I couldn't get to sleep at night. I would wake up in the middle of the night, and I couldn't get back to sleep. And I was able to really cope with that pretty well until I went into the military and got married and had a family. And obviously, when you're working full time and you've got a family, life isn't very forgiving when you don't get a good night of sleep. And I certainly, it started to take its toll on me. And I was moody. I was grumpy. I couldn't think as well as I wanted to at work. It just started to kind of take its toll on every area of my life. And so I started trying all kinds of different things. I would try some relaxation training. I would try medications, those different kinds of things. And so it was probably late 20s, or around the time I turned 30, when I came across what's called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And I mean, this really opened my eyes. I learned about these strategies and then these techniques for taking control of insomnia without medications. And
Keys that you look at, what you described as some secrets about insomnia. Obviously, they're no longer secrets since you know them, teach them, write about them, but would you share with our viewing audience what you consider some secrets, out in the open secrets about insomnia?
Sure, sure. Well, I call them secrets because the majority of healthcare providers actually either don't know about them, don't believe in them, or don't actually know what to do with them. If they actually do kind of know that they're there and that they play a central role in trouble sleeping. So there's really three main things that I find that probably 90% of primary care providers aren't aware of about insomnia. And so, it's kind of what leads to medication being the primary thing. And I call these three things the insomnia trap, because once they get started, you have to directly do something about them if you're ever going to get free of insomnia. And so the first part is that if you have trouble sleeping repeatedly over a period of weeks or months, sooner or later your brain...
I'm a psychologist with specialty in all forms of stress management, including addressing sleep issues. And I'm very honored today to be able to interview Dr. Robert Glidewell of the Colorado Insomniac Clinic. Before we start our interview today, I just want to say a couple words about Sleep ASAP. Sleep ASAP is a new international educational platform to increase awareness of sleep challenges and addressing sleep challenges by means other than pharmaceuticals. We're available. We have a number of webinars already posted online, and we're on Facebook, and you can find us on Meetup, and we hope you'll join us, and we hope that this webinar will be very useful for you. So welcome to you, Dr. Glidewell. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Great. So just off the top, would you tell us briefly a little bit about your personal story in overcoming insomnia and how you come to be a sleep expert today, in brief?
Sure, sure. I had trouble sleeping really from the day I was born. I mean, my mom has stories about how I would never let